Hi, I'm David,
And I'm Asu. Welcome to.
the Hobby Hangout.
Today we'll be talking about role-playing games and also known as RPGs. And we are going to discuss why these type of games are actually quite fun. So David, why don't you tell me, how would you convince people that are watching right now that haven't played RPGs before? What would you tell them for them to give that first step?
I think first and foremost, I would highlight that role-playing games don't actually require acting. I think that's a big factor that maybe some people will think just based off of things that they've seen on, streaming channels or YouTube
Memes.
videos, memes. Obviously, your group is free to do and experience role-playing games however they like, but it's not mandatory for you to actually act and role play as your character as you're playing. So I think that's one of the big items to keep in mind. And role-playing games give you that opportunity and the flexibility to create your own story that you don't get out of, structured games and structured rule sets. This is more of a framework that you can experiment, enjoy together, and create new and wonderful worlds and stories.
It's not just the story, so it's also your characters, right? You can make them similar to you, or you can make them very different and just explore creating stories based on someone else's perspective, right? Based on your character's perspective. And I think that this is a great way to, I guess, have some fun with creativity. And you can also bring them to the corporate world, perhaps adapting them so they're not as long. And you can use them as team building exercises to practice problem solving, creativity, storytelling, which is one of the skills that a lot of jobs ask for nowadays. So actually, let's start from the beginning. How did we even get into RPGs?
Sure, yeah. I think first we did try D&D many years ago through I think it was a starter kit. We didn't take the time to really learn the rule sets and or really understand that, one individual really had to take ownership of that game master role. So we kind of all just tried to muddy our way through it. And it wasn't that enjoyable of an experience, and I think we must have gotten rid of it because we definitely don't have it anymore. But it was that first experience that didn't go over well, and I don't think we really explored RPGs for a while after that. Um, the real first dive into it, I would say, is with the My Little Pony role-playing game framework. And that one came about when my daughter was born, and we had gone to a hobby store and just looking at different games that we could try. And obviously, she was into My Little Pony, and we watched the show together.
Everything was My Little Pony.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of stuffies as well.
And just seeing that, when she saw that, her eyes lit up. She was excited. I browsed through the book, take a look. It was a simple enough system. It was geared obviously to a younger audience, but it wasn't a kid's game either. Like there was enough there in context and rules and framework that adults can play it as well. So yeah, I dove right in, bought the rule book, got a starter kit and a couple of additional stories as well, and we started playing that with my daughter. Uh,
Do you remember how old she was?
um, it would have been around after our son was born, so she was probably around 6, 7 years old when we first tried it. Um, And obviously, there's the character building aspect, which I think she enjoyed. You get to create your pony, you focus on identifying your skills, but it's not just about, creating the best character you can, right? And part of that creation of your character is to identify what are your flaws, what are your quirks. You're not just a superhero. um, and, identifying how your character will have to work through those flaws and through those quirks that may impact the story sometimes at a critical moment when based on the situation, it may be something that you're not strong at. But it was fun, and she definitely enjoyed creating her character.
What would you say that differentiates My Little Pony from other role-playing systems? And especially, why is it good for kids?
Well, I think the overall theme of it. Obviously, it is child friendly, um, but the main aspect, I guess, that's really strong in it is looking at how do you solve your problems and your encounters, ideally not through violence. So it's very much focused on friendship, collaboration and partnership, and trying to tackle your problems through that lens of friendship and communication versus trying to use a weapon and brute force your way through a problem. So it was a good experience, and it was a learning experience, especially for our daughter who was young, um, playing that game, and that focus on friendship, focus on teamwork, focus on conversations when you encounter enemies, and looking at different opportunities to move through that problem.
Problem solving.
Yes, problem solving.
Yeah, I remember when you're designing your character, you got to give yourself a cutie mark.
Yeah.
That was fun to do. And then I also think that they included some models as well, right, to paint?
No, we did that ourselves actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Roughly around that time, My Little Pony was obviously very popular at that point in time. And I think it must have been through maybe Kinder Surprises or some kind of, um, they were just random toy sets. So we took some of them, primed them with black, and then you're able to paint their own ponies.
There you go.
Yeah.
Then what else have you played with? I mean, now that we are on kind of like the kid-friendly RPGs, what other games have you played?
There's several like storytelling board games, but not true RPGs. In terms of RPGs, the other one that we played with our kids, both of them was No Thank You Evil. Um, I can't really recall why it's called No Thank You Evil, but that's just the name of the game. But it gives you sort of that structured environment, very imagination based, where the characters are going through a sort of a portal. I think it was underneath their bed, going into this new world. And in this world, they can develop their own characters, whether they're a superhero, a robot person, a wizard or magician, things like that. And then identify who their sidekick will be, whether it's a car, a talking car, or a horse, or things like that. So does provide a little bit more structure, but it's still fairly flexible. And the way they've developed that system is it has different stages for your character building. So you can, if you have like younger kids, it's a more simplified character set versus an older kid can have a more complex and different aspects to it. But it all plays together at the same time, so not everyone has to play at the same level.
Yeah, and on that thought as well, there is a Dungeons and Dragons board game, which could be a great way to introduce to kids or maybe people that are not fully into RPGs yet. Again, like you mentioned, right, there's a little bit more structure in what you can do, but there's still some aspects of creativity that you can get into it without getting too much out of your comfort zone or again, just having, for example, if no one has a lot of experience being a game master, then it might be easier to start with a board game, perhaps. Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. As you said, the structured D&D games, and there's several of them. I know we played one and we have one of them, but there's definitely different types of them. It gives you that ability to play in sort of that space, without having a dedicated GM. Typically, the board game will run through that model for you, um, and direct the game itself, either through cards or rules and things like that. And typically, like your character creation is also simplified, right? They're sort of preset and you can pick. There's still some variability there, but it's sort of preset for you. So it definitely simplifies the setup and the getting into it, and as well as sort of the story creation that you can play in. But it still leaves it open for the players to create their own narrative and how they interact with the encounters and the monsters and things like that.
Recently, what was it, like maybe a few months ago, we had our first game of Dungeons and Dragons. This time it was more successful than the first time many years ago that we tried it. Um, from a preparation perspective, tell me what was your experience or how did you prepare yourself to become the game master and get us all excited to try it?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of going back to that first experience where none of us kind of committed to being that GM. This time around, I committed to being that role. And it is something I enjoyed. Typically, when we play other games, I'm the one responsible for, or I guess not responsible, but I take it upon myself to learn the rules and sort of run the setup and get everybody into it. So I already am comfortable with that. So I took that role on in this case, did some research, read as much as I could prior to the games, watched a few uh, GM tutorials and advice videos. Um, I think one was the
Builder?
Bob the World Builder, I think it was. Had some great videos, and just being able to think about uh, the rule set as a framework, I think really helped me the most. Understanding that, try and learn it as much as possible, but be flexible enough and work with the team. No one's there as a judge or a referee, right? If I get something wrong, it's better to just simply go with it as long as it's understandable to the teams versus trying to go through the book and slow the game down or slow the experience down. Um, so just understanding the world, doing a little bit of research to understand the narrative and what the objectives were, and then taking the time to help each of you build your characters in advance really helped a lot as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that, and I don't remember what we did the first time that we tried it. I don't remember spending that much time creating a character. So I don't even know if we actually created anything. But this time around, a few months ago, the character creation took us maybe over an hour. So I feel like having a specific session just to develop your character and then not committing to actually playing anything that specific day was a good idea because otherwise, like we were already fatigued after coming up with a character, and because there's a lot of definitions or attributes that we didn't know what it meant,
Hmm.
that it gets a little bit overwhelming. So definitely from a participant's perspective, or at least from my personal perspective,
From a first time participant.
yes, first time. Getting that dedicated time to build a character. And then, like, for example, in our case, we did it, it was three of us building it at the same time. I think that it would have been better to just build it one at a time because everyone was going at a different pace and everyone wanted to understand some of the attributes better than others. And so trying to get all of the answers at the same time wasn't working very well. So I think that one on one would be better. Um, and definitely having someone to help you set it up, someone who is either committing to doing all the research or that has already some background to help you out and make it a smoother process. That will be, I think that it will enhance the experience.
Yeah. And I definitely learned from that first character creation set. So as we started to include more people in our party, from my brother and my sister and her partner, uh, I made sure that we did those sessions individually, taking the time for them to understand the system and understand the attributes and characteristics of their character as they were building them, and have that dedicated session. Not just for them, though, it was also for me as the GM, having that focused attention to better understand who they were going to be in the game, so that I could build that into the story better, and leverage their specific skill sets or their flaws and things like that into the story. So it definitely helps me as well to do that.
What other things did you have to do behind the scenes that we're not looking at, like as a game master?
Um, I definitely took some time to at least understand some of the non-player characters that you would interact with, just so that they had some semblance of an actual person that you could interact with, and not just like a bad video game where they only have one or two lines every time you talk to them. So I wanted them to be obviously not complex characters, but somebody that you can interact with, understand either their attitude or their personality, and sometimes play off of it in a funny manner, or in a stubborn or aggravating manner, and cause those emotions from the other players as we're playing the game.
Yeah, I remember when we had an objective where we had to bring this lady from out of town into the town to protect her from the dragon that was, you know, going around. We had to go and convince her. but then that lady was very stubborn,
Yeah.
or I would say the game master was very stubborn, and I think that at first when we went there, I thought, well, you know what, like it's a lady that should be she'll feel afraid of the dragon and she's gonna come with us. And then we encounter someone that was very set on not leaving their home. And so I remember having to pause and be like, wait a second, like, what are we gonna do now? Because we do want to complete our objective and get some gold because your brother wanted to get some axe or something. So we need a lot of gold. But then on the other hand, it's like it flexes that muscle of problem solving, right? It's like that lady is stubborn, it's not gonna move. But you also want to reach your objective. So instead of focusing on reaching the objective from a literal perspective, the way that the objective says, what other ways can you work it out in a way that it satisfies that
Mhm.
objective? So in our case, we ended up, I think you wrote, or the lady wrote a letter for us to the mayor or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, right. So that was how we ended up making everyone happy with our outcome.
So this kind of leads into our second topic or question for today's episode, which is around, why RPGs in general and some tips for getting started. I do want to mention one thing first, which is, again, this isn't like we're not trying to say that board games and RPGs and things like that are going to make you an exceptional person or anything like that. They're there to have fun. But I think it's also good to at least give some value to these types of experience. Do build skill sets and, you know, build creativity, build problem solving skills, things like that, that you can take out into the real world outside, right? And can be applied. So they give you that opportunity to flex those skills and practice those skills in these environments. Obviously, I'm not saying it's training or anything like that, but they're there to have fun. But don't diminish that. You can get benefits out of playing games regularly for sure. Um, so from the role playing game and sort of why role playing games in general, I think the big one for me is that creativity, having that ability to build a world yourself, tell a story yourself, and not necessarily have to be yourself in that story, right? So you can build your character, and as you said, someone that sort of resonates directly with who you are, or somebody could be completely different from who you are, right? And then you play the game through the lens of that character. Is something that's unique to role playing games. Now, obviously, there's a lot of board games nowadays that sort of have that RPG element to the board game, like Massive Darkness, Gloomhaven, Oathsworn, tons of games that are like that, and they're good games. There's nothing wrong with them. But obviously, they're a lot more structured. They have their rule sets, their set stories, and narrative that you're driving through. Yes, it has some flexibility, but it's not to the same degree that you get from playing an RPG. Um, what about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think from a participant's perspective and someone who isn't very well versed in creating worlds that are in my imagination, I will say that, I will say that I was at first, one of those people that thought that I needed to do some acting there and really get into my character. So that was something I didn't want to do. But I think that once we played it, for me, is less about the storytelling and more about observing how people are having fun with it and how the interactions happen. Like that's something that I'm really enjoying. How people end up surprising you with the action that they take or whatever comment they make, because again, like you said, right, it's through the lens of their character. And sometimes they play along so that everything is, what is the expression? Something in rainbows.
I'm not sure what
Well,
expression.
it's like everything is gonna work out well.
Okay.
Um, but then instead it could just play to their flaws, right? And take us in a different direction that, because, it's their imagination, right? And you just have to go along with it. Like for example, your brother and his character who does not like orcs and sometimes going rogue a little bit there.
Yes, getting the group into potentially very dangerous situations that they would
Hmm.
clearly not be ready to handle.
Yeah. So I think, like, again, is more than the story itself. For me, it's like how people are reacting to that. What makes them smile, I guess, as we're playing. That's for me what I'm enjoying the most, just like seeing that interaction between people.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note that uh, as you play role playing games, as I said, it's not about acting. You don't need to pretend to be your character and dress and talk in any different way than you normally do.
You can.
Yes, you absolutely can, but it's not a necessity. That's not a key part of playing a role playing game. But even as you're playing, to your point, some people will play role playing games. Yes, they'll still play their characters through the story, but they may not be the loudest person at the table, and a lot of the enjoyment they may get is just from being part of that experience. They can still contribute to the story, but they may not be sort of the main character of the group, right?
Hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to enjoy it either. So I think it's important that everybody can play the game the way they want to and interact with the group the way they choose to. It's not the same for everyone.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I'm actually interested to hear your perspective as a game master. Like, what is their experience like when you're not actually the one, I guess, making those decisions? Like, how do you, from that perspective, like from sitting on the sidelines, what is it that you experience?
Um, so it's something that I do enjoy. I've always been, I guess, relatively creative through various outlets, and I've even written here and there as well, some short stories and just that storytelling in general, which I enjoy. And I think that's the aspect that I like the most is just being able to create this world, this sort of this playground for everyone to play in, right? So giving you enough details so you understand what's around you, but not giving you any firm directions and leaving it open for you to make decisions and interact and go left or right or go north south, what you choose where you want to go. um, Obviously some of them may be bad decisions, but I'm not going to prevent the teams or the group from making those decisions. I may highlight some specific dangers if you do go down that path, but ultimately it's up to you. But I think that's what I enjoy the most as the game master is just being able to create that, or I guess create the foundation for the narrative, and then watch and see how you interact with that. It just makes me excited.
I remember seeing some discussions or a meme about, the game master from a games master perspective. It doesn't all have to be solved with violence, right? So as a game master, what is it that you have done to help the team see that that's not the only option?
Yes, yeah. I know as I was doing some research and getting prepared for it, the term I came across was having a D&D group turn into a group of murder hobos. Where, the first instinct is just brute force, right? You encounter a problem, pull out your weapons and try and kill it. And maybe not necessarily where there is a problem. The group may just pull out their weapons and try to kill things. So keeping that in mind, I kind of thought of, okay, how do I not ensure, but how do I structure the story to make it apparent to the group that that's not your only option for how to deal with these encounters. Um, so I think it's a bit of a challenge, but it's also fun for me as well. Like that first instance where you ran into the manticore. I know you as a group kind of paused for a second to figure out what to do, and it was, I think, the first encounter that the group encountered, or the group was involved in, and I think you chose to charge right at it with your axe because they were taking too long to make a decision.
Sounds like me.
um, and I took that opportunity to have the creature notice you because you were yelling and charging at it, and not prevent you from continuing that action, but with the creature turning around, having it speak, right? So giving the group that bit of information that this creature,
Does
is
it speech?
that this creature is capable of speaking, capable of understanding and reasoning. Um, gave you pause.
Yeah.
So you stopped immediately your shard, even though it was still the creature was still being aggressive and still a threat. Um, the group decided to start interacting through conversation to see what was the situation truly about, and it ended up that you did not have to fight the creature after all. Uh,
Empathy one.
yeah. So yeah, that's something that I enjoy, just giving that challenge, I guess, as the game master to create that story where it will give you options and you don't always have to solve everything with that sword.
So, with all of this in mind, I hope that there's some people out there being like, huh, maybe I'll give RPGs a try now. So, now tell me about how to get started in terms of is there going to be an entry barrier because of the materials that you need, or like, tell me what you need to get started?
Yeah, I think the one aspect that's really good about role playing games is the low cost to entry. Like I said, there's obviously board games that do that role playing game structure. Typically, they're very expensive. They're very big boxes. You have a ton of components, obviously, because it is a structured story.
And they also have require a big space
They
to set
require
them
big
up, right?
space, yeah, and obviously take time to set up. And
Hmm.
ideally, if you have space to leave it out versus having to pack it up and remember what everybody had as you progress through the story is very difficult with those types of games. Um, Whereas traditionally with role playing games, all you really need is a rule set. I'm sure that there's several that you could probably get online for free. You can get them from your library, but even if you're purchasing them, they're not expensive books. And you don't need all the books. Realistically, all you need is sort of that core rule book or a starter set or something like that to start. And then aside from that, you just need paper, pen, and dice.
Hmm.
Um, and yes, you can get fancy dice, but even that you don't necessarily have to spend money on. You can Google role playing dice, and you'll right on the browser itself. You can pick how many dice you need and roll them digitally. Um, and yeah, you have that all there. It's a very low cost to enter and participate in a role playing game. Um,
Yeah, the last time when we have been playing, because your family is scattered throughout Ontario and all the way to BC, we actually had to do it in a virtual way. And for us in our house, the ones my daughter and I, we had the actual map. But for everyone else that had joined the call, you said that you sent them a picture of the map, I think.
yes, yeah, I sent them a picture through the Zoom call, and yeah, they just had it on their screen, so they understood where the general city was and what was in the city. Uh, but the missions or the quests that we went on, there was no physical map or digital map that I was sharing with them. I was just describing it, right? Um,
So potentially, it's not that every single person that is playing has to invest in
Correct.
that
Yeah.
book, right? It's just like one group purchase, or if you find a game master that already has all of these
Yeah.
rule books, right, or the frameworks, it potentially wouldn't cost you anything.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, you'll see, and I myself do like to look at these fancy boards with tons of uh, customizable and magnetized dungeon tiles and your characters and terrain and everything like that. And absolutely, there's nothing stopping you from doing that, but it's not a necessity. You don't need that to enjoy a role playing game. As I mentioned, all you really need is that pen and paper and the rule set, and just playing it through that theater of the mind, describing the situations, having the story flow and move quickly. And even that rule set to me is just a framework, right? As I mentioned, no one's going to be judging whether you're following the rules to a T, as long as it's natural to how the team is or how the group is operating throughout the story. That's really all you need is to operate within that framework, so you can leverage the rule set versus follow them to the T.
Mhm. And I think that another important aspect too is that if you this is gonna be your first time trying it, finding a group that you feel comfortable with, whether you know them or not, but just that you feel comfortable in that vibe, or that at least you have a connection with the game master, because the game master, I think, is key in keeping the atmosphere positive and enjoyable. So I think that just like finding that right group to give it a try is going to make to give you the great experience that you perhaps want to have. Whereas that experience could potentially make you feel like RPGs are not for you, but it's not necessarily the game itself. It could just be the group of people that you're playing it with and not connecting with them.
Yeah. Um, Now, obviously, if you want a little more structure to start, as we've mentioned, there's various board games that are a little more structured. So you could go that route to start. Obviously, it does require more components, but they're usually packaged
And
in
more
a
expensive
box.
too.
They're typically a little more pricey too, yeah. But it does give you that flexibility of not necessarily needing a game master either. So that's an option. And for like 2 players, we have the To the Last Gasp, which is kind of a role-playing structured card game of a duel. So it does definitely play on that creativity and a lot of that speaking, right? Because although you're fighting in the game, a lot of the cards are about, taunting the other player, trying to discourage them or, play on their anger and things like that. So, yeah.
I did not enjoy that game. It felt too. We're not necessarily aggressive with each other, even when we're teasing. We're not
Yeah.
that like that. So it felt
Forced.
yes, yeah, and
Forced and phony.
yeah. And I'm getting a little bit angry. I think I did not enjoy that, but
Maybe we'll have to give it another try in a little while, yeah.
but maybe we'll make a video of us playing that one so that we can share in how uncomfortable it is for us.
But yeah, so I think getting started, there's a lot of different ways that you can get started, and obviously there is D&D, but there's also a large variety of different themes and worlds. As I mentioned, we've done My Little Pony, but there's science fiction and fantasy. There's modern day ones. I think even Zombicide, the board game, has a Zombicide RPG. So there's all sorts of different styles and story and frameworks out there. Um, so it doesn't, if you're not into fantasy, you don't necessarily have to stick with fantasy. If you want to try a role-playing game, there's definitely tons of options out there for you. So if you're interested, look for something that interests you.
Memories that we have or fun moments that we remember from playing with our family and friends.
Yeah. So maybe I'll start with our kids and playing the D&D board game. So as we mentioned, it's a little more structured. Although even though it has the rule set where you don't necessarily need a GM, I still did take that role just to help build that story and have them understand that they have the ability to do whatever they want to a degree in there. And then just seeing that light bulb moment in our son when he realized that, oh, okay, he can actually do sort of anything as long as he's describing it. And taking the decision that to fight this monster, the best approach would be to pick up his sister's character and throw her at the monster. And seeing her with that, like, what are you doing? sort of look on her face. So that was fun. And he definitely enjoyed that aspect of the game.
Yeah, I also remember that from the backpacks that you have to pick, he had a rope in there and a bunch of other items as well. But the only thing that he was using was the rope, and he was using it to do absolutely everything. Like that rope had so many uses.
Yeah.
And even though like he was just focused on that one item, I think that that creativity that he showed in like getting very resourceful of what to do with just the one rope was very funny to see as well.
Yeah.
There's the killing the monster too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Why don't you tell them from your perspective what it looked like?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, you weren't quite as comfortable with the storytelling to start. So I think you had a very generic descriptions in terms of how you would fight and defeat monsters or win the battle. And I think maybe you were just getting not frustrated, but like.
Well, I saw the kids looking at me like I wasn't trying. I wasn't good enough at it. And so I remember, I think it might have been the last monster that I decided to go all the way in. And do you remember what it was that I said?
Yeah, I think you chopped its head off, I think you said, and you like poked its eyes out. And yeah, it was very graphic.
Yeah, I remember the kids just look at me like, "Who are you? We don't know you." Um, it was fun.
Yeah. It brought out your what was your gamer profile? The killer type or something like that?
Well, that's for video games. There's
Yeah.
Bartle. I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's psychology in gaming. And so I took the test, and like again, this is more for video games, and I think it's very specific ones. But I think that it really spoke to me. So I'm 90% killer, and even though it's supposed to be for that specific use case, I think that it applies to me for any other games.
Yeah.
I'm so into it.
Sort of other memories, I guess, playing like the D&D games or that storyline that we were playing with with our family and friends there, or I guess family, sorry. Um, just having those, as you were mentioning, those occasions where we weren't expecting certain group members to do certain things. So I presented them with like an orc and an outhouse, and two of both of my brothers deciding that they would lay waste to this one orc that was clearly defenseless, and having issues in the washroom. But they made a mess of that outhouse.
It was actually quite funny that your brother, who is very quiet generally, decided to have a character who was an entertainer.
Yeah,
And I think that he kept singing or playing music like
yeah.
pretty
His
much the whole time.
character was a musician and has an accordion with him, which is very unique. Nothing I would have.
Did he try to defeat something with the music?
No, but I think he cast sort of a. I think because he was a bard, I believe. So I think he was trying to put somebody to sleep or calm them down or something like that. Yeah. The RPGs present you with those unique situations where, as I mentioned, like you get to play the story through your character's lens, and act through their persona, right? So
And then
very funny situations.
there's also the tension, right? When you decide to do something, but you still have to roll for it.
Yes, yeah.
And I think there was the one occasion where, out of how many we were playing, was it 6 of us, 7 of us?
The six of
6?
you strongly felt that you were proficient fighters, which the dice roll clearly showed none of you were.
I think there were like 3 or 4 people rolling fails in a row.
Yes.
We were in a very precarious situation.
Yeah.
I think we
And
made it though.
and the group trying to be sneaky when, again, not clearly not good at it. Failing throws and not being proficient in those sneaking skills, yet still trying to do it. But yeah, it creates those situations and creates a better story for it, I believe.
Closing thoughts. Why, if someone came and tell you, why should I give RPGs a try? What will be your one takeaway to try to convince them?
Perhaps it'd be around that freedom, right? You can definitely have fun through board games and having fun through those structured games, but you're not going to get that level of freedom to create the way you do in an RPG. It just flexes that skill set so much more and leverages it so much more than any other type of game, I feel. Because whether you realize it or not, the story itself lives or dies on how much the group decides to interact with it and create the experience themselves. Um, I know that can sound daunting if you've never done it, but with a good GM, they can help facilitate that and help you create that story, and it becomes your own. So you have that freedom, and you create something that's very unique to your group, and that speaks to your group because you've built it yourself. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think also keeping in mind that it's flexible in the sense that you don't have to be meeting necessarily on a frequent basis, right?
No,
I
yeah.
think that it depends on your group, it depends on your availability. um, because the story doesn't just stop, right? Like you could continue playing even if someone is missing. It is still possible to adapt it, and then you come back and join in when you're ready for it. Your character continues to evolve, or if you want, you can just create a brand new
Yeah.
character from scratch. Um, Make up a fun story of why the other one left and the new one came.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, it just comes back to what you said, right? It's about freedom and exploring your creativity.
Absolutely.
I hope that now you are convinced to try RPGs if you haven't tried it before, or if you are going to try to convince someone to give it a try and let us know how that goes. And also let us know about your own experience if you are someone who has already tried it, whether it was a good experience or bad. We would love to hear from you. Everyone has a different experience, so it will be interesting to hear others' perspectives.
And if it was a bad experience, maybe what do you think could have made it a better experience? Was it the GM? Was it the people involved in the party? Was it the story or the theme maybe didn't speak to you and you didn't connect with it? Um, yeah, leave it in the comments. All right. So still no tagline.
Also, you cut your hair.
I cut my hair in case you didn't notice. I know it's not a big change, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, don't forget to subscribe. Join us on future episodes. Keep rolling those dice and having fun.
All right, until the next time then.
Bye.
Bye.